we're going to be looking at what happened the rest of that day as Luke tells us one of the stories that became to be so important in the early church. And as we look in a few minutes at the rest of chapter 24, I want to set the stage because I found a little video that I think, while paraphrasing some of what we might have read, we're not going to read all this long narrative that's in Luke 24. While it paraphrases this, I think it really captures the essence of it. I did a lot of Google searches this week looking for something that would kind of tell the story in a briefer form and more compelling, and a lot of them just didn't get it. And this one, which was done by the BBC about 10 years ago, it came out of a miniseries called The Passion. It really seems to convey why the two disciples are fleeing Jerusalem. And so listen for that. You know, why they don't pick Middle Eastern looking actors for these things all the time, I don't get. You know, I'm like, really, guys? These two British guys, but at least one of them has brown eyes. So anyway, try to look past that. But listen for it, because I think, and I'm going to ask you what you think. The ending of this story is a very creative way of showing possibly how they didn't recognize him. I've always wondered, how could they not have recognized Jesus along the way if he comes to them? All right, so let's see that.
Slow down. Slow down. We're far enough from Jerusalem. We're just two pilgrims on the road. And if anyone asks, we were in Jerusalem for Passover. We heard of this Jesus. We saw him preaching in the temple, but we never saw him. Oh, Galileans, so maybe we heard him preach. We heard he was from Galilee.
Who's that you're talking about?
Jesus of Nazareth.
What about him?
He was some sort of teacher. Some pilgrims thought he was the leader come to free us.
So they said to us.
He was condemned and handed over to the Romans.
So?
He was crucified. And now they said he's come back to life.
You don't believe the scriptures?
Why do you say this?
Isaiah wrote that the Son of God will come to earth. He'll know human death at the hands of men. Surely Jesus told you these things would happen.
I heard such things.
You're slow to believe.
My brother's house is this way. Why don't you stop with us for some food? Come. Come and eat with us.
What are you doing?
This is the bread of life. This is my body, given up for you. This is my blood, poured out for the healing of others.
I tell you, he is risen. He appeared to us. He broke bread with us.
Just gives me goosebumps to watch it for the fifth time. I mean, of course, what happened there? what happened in terms of them not recognizing him and then recognizing him? Yeah, but what literally happened did it? Yeah, but there's something different that happened from the way it's usually portrayed. You catch it? His countenance changed. He was two different men. It was two different men. Yeah, I mean, I never thought of that. I mean, because I always read the story and thought, like, and I've preached. Turn me down just a little bit, would you, Trey? I've often preached this passage and told people, well, you know, if your grandfather who died walked in the room, you probably wouldn't recognize him. Because I always thought, how do you find this story like believable? Because they're with him for like hours, and they don't figure out, you look a lot like Jesus. And then this way it happened. It were two different men. And then when he breaks the bread and pours the wine, then he becomes the Jesus they know. I thought that was incredible. So there were many things about that. Of course, there were things you could critique about it. But my focus this morning is this whole business of the way that Jesus came to them as, once again, disciples were not exactly on their best game. While they were fleeing from him, he comes to them and interrupts their refugee flight from Jerusalem. And why are they fleeing from Jerusalem? The same reason why Simon Peter denied, the same reason why the rest of them fled, the same reason why when he was actually being crucified, that it was only the women who were there at the foot of the cross, that the male disciples were further away watching from a distance. Because anytime the Romans crucified a rabble-rouser, you want to get it was just like looking for what we would consider a terrorist group today. You want to get everybody connected. You want to get the whole cell. And so all the men were hiding and they're running because they don't want to be identified with Jesus of Nazareth, because the Romans have now figured out, got to crucify them all. So they're disciples on the run. And so running from Jerusalem becomes for us, you know, a symbol, once again, of disciples who have a lack of faith, but also, perhaps even in a broader sense, disillusionment. Because let's remember, it's not just that they were afraid of the Romans doing the same thing to them that they did to Jesus. It was, in fact, that they had believed in this guy. And one of the main ways you knew if somebody was a false Messiah, people were saying all the time, I'm the Messiah, is if they got themselves crucified. Duh, not the Messiah. It's not that hard to figure out. And so they're disillusioned. They think once more, you know, God let him down. I mean, he was some kind of prophet. He did miracles and all this, but he got murdered and stripped naked and shamed, and 3 days have come, and he, you know, it's over. And so this becomes kind of a symbol of the many, many people who kind of give a shot at following Jesus, but then life disappoints them. You know? And you end up kind of being on your way out of it all. So the risen Christ, he comes to them. He's gracious. Now it is interesting that he says to them, in scriptures it says, you're foolish, you don't understand. And he actually said something kind of startling, and you saw the video, why are you slow to believe? So he kind of gets their attention that way. But the main posture that he has is graciousness. He hangs out with them. You know, he's walking with them, and he gives them a choice. You know, we didn't read this part of the story, but it says that there's a place where they're going to park place in the road, and he started walking a different way. I think we saw the video. He started kind of walking one way, and they had to say, do we want to keep talking to this guy? So there's an interesting element of choice there. People need to make a choice about whether or not they want to respond to the hospitality of Jesus. But of course, it's him explaining the scripture that they really have this feeling like their eyes, their hearts are starting to get excited again. They describe it later as their hearts beginning to burn. Verse 32. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" And then, of course, his graciousness came in the way that he shared the meal with them. You know, how he sat with them and took time for them. And of course, the passage describing that, when he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Well, by the way, what does that sound like, that sentence? The Last Supper, or the way we do communion. Every time I'm privileged to lead a communion service, I say those words. Paul repeated them in 1 Corinthians. Took bread, giving thanks for it, blessed it, broke it, saying, then he adds, "This is my body," which the video he added that. And he might have done that on that road to Emmaus meal. So the church in the centuries that followed really claimed that story, because they said it's when we break bread together in his name, not only remember that Last Supper, but we remember when he made himself known to the two guys who were walking away from Jerusalem, that he was in fact not a disappointment. God the Father did show up, that he's alive. And the whole trajectory of hope has been changed. They glimpsed Jesus for that moment. It's always interesting to me that he disappears as quickly as they glimpse him. And sometimes life is that way. We see a little bit of Jesus for a moment. I got to say that, last night at one point I was looking out, and I feel like when I see people coming together in the kingdom of God on earth, I glimpse Jesus. And then it disappears. It's time to clean up. Do a lot of work. It lasts for a moment. It's like that. And that glimpse of Jesus, kind of keeps you going. They then realized that as the people of the new covenant, that this meal would be the way Passover would have a whole new meaning. Let's see it on the screen again, the verses of verse 35. Then the two of them told what had happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. I think in many ways, people glimpse Jesus in our time when the scriptures, which are otherwise just kind of dry historical stuff, ancient history, come alive for them when the scriptures open, and particularly when somebody helps them. And often it's when people are not in a good place. Often when people are best able to see Jesus, ironically, is not when they're feeling real religious. It's when they're fleeing God. They may be fleeing church. They may have been hurt by the institutional church. They may have been disappointed because it didn't do much for them. They may be fleeing family. They may be fleeing morality and saying, I want to live however I want to live. It's my body. They may be fleeing responsibility. But so see, in some ways, Jerusalem stands for God and responsibility. And fleeing it is like, I'm done with the God thing. And then Jesus finds a way to make himself known. And sometimes it's really mystical. I've met people that have actually had experience of seeing the risen Christ or having a mystical experience. More times, it's when Jesus sends a disciple, somebody who represents him, somebody who embodies him in another person's path. A disciple who kind of walks alongside them, who kind of meets them where they're at, even though they ain't into the religious thing. And they're actually going away from it. But meets them there, it kind of surprises them there, and they don't realize yet that it's Jesus that's talking to them. It's just a guy along the road. It's just a woman who kind of becomes friends and shares the journey of life. And as the relationship builds, there's an authenticity to telling each other your stories. Like in this story, the two guys on their way said, "Hadn't you heard about Jesus of Nazareth? He was a great prophet. He was killed. It's horrible. You don't know about this." And they tell their story, and then he tells his story. I think God does that now. He puts people in each other's path. And often they're not walking towards Jerusalem. They're walking away from Jerusalem. And yet that's where Jesus is. Not people going towards God, not people going towards the religious thing, but people going away from it. That's where Jesus is. A lot of religion is about, hey, get with us and go that way. And what the Jesus movement is about is, no, God does the crazy thing. He goes with people who are going away. And he sends people to do that nowadays. And they may not have realized in the time that they're actually representing Jesus. They're just trying to be authentic of who they are. And in their own ways, they perhaps help people by saying what they understand of the Christian faith. When people say, I lost somebody close to me, God's let all these bad things happen to me, they sort of try to explain, well, I don't know if God's the cause of all the disappointment. The movie The Shack that many of us saw kind of helped with that. The God that I believe in, the God of Jesus, is a God that doesn't, pull strings like puppets and cause anything, but it's a God that enters people's situations and makes the journey with them. And in your own voice, you kind of do that. But this God who enters suffering, the good news is that while he lets bad things happen, the story ends with resurrection. It ends with a win by God, the ultimate win. Like the two on the road to Emmaus, we may have had the experience in our lives of walking away from Jerusalem. We might have had that experience. Maybe some of you are having that now. Even though you're here today, there's still been a sense that, you've been walked away in some ways. Disillusionment, disappointment. I think for some of us, we think back of times that we walked away from the church and Jesus sent someone to come along and help us to go deeper in the faith. Some of you may have heard of the book Blue Like Jazz. It was a bestseller about 10, 15 years ago. A guy named Don Miller, who's at the time was in his 20s, he describes a friend he met at Reed College in Portland, Oregon. Now, Reed College is like probably the most countercultural, way out there lifestyle school in America. It's where Steve Jobs decided to go to school because it had that kind of reputation of, a lot of experimentation with drugs and all that. And it's extremely secular. And this guy, Don Miller, came from a Baptist family, and he decided to go to a college very different from what he grew up in. And he met all these very secular people, and his faith changed a lot, and that's what the book Blue Like Jazz is about. It's why it sold 1 million copies. A lot of young adults at the time still read that book, and it helps them with their own journey. But he talks about a girl named Penny, a young woman. She came from a very messed up family, totally non-religious, into drugs, sleeping around, which of course was common. And while Penny was studying abroad in France, she met Nadine, another American woman. They're totally different, yet far away from home. They became friends with each other. I want to read you just a little bit about because I think it's cool, the relationship between Penny and Nadine. During the first 3 weeks in France, it was comforting for Penny that Nadine cared so much about her past and her story. Because Penny had a really bad past, and she had family problems, and she had suffered a lot of abandonment by the guys she slept with and that kind of stuff. This helped Penny listen to Nadine's story, and one night while walking on a beach in the south of France, Nadine explained to Penny why she was a Christian. She said she believed Christ was a revolutionary, a humanitarian of sorts, sent from God to a world that had broken itself. Penny was frustrated that Nadine was a Christian. She couldn't believe that a girl that was this kind and accepting could subscribe to the same religion that generated the Crusades and took all the stands that she was opposed to, kind of things you know about our culture. Nadine and I would sit for hours in her room. Mostly we would talk about boys or school, but always by the end of it we talked about God. The thing I loved about Nadine was that I never felt like she was selling anything. She She would talk about God as if she knew him, as if she talked to him on the phone that day. She never was ashamed, which is the thing that some Christians I had encountered. They felt like they had to sell God, as if he were soap or a vacuum cleaner. And it's like they really weren't listening to me. They really didn't care about me. They wanted me just to buy their products. I came to realize I had judged all Christians on the personalities of a few. That was frightening to me too, because it had been so easy just to dismiss Christians as nuts. But here was Nadine. I didn't have a category for her. To Nadine, God was a being with whom she interacted, and even more, Don, that she's talking to, Nadine believed that God liked her. I thought it was beautiful. And more than that, her faith was a spiritual thing that produced a humanitarianism that was convincing. I was really freaked out because I wanted to be good, but I wasn't good. I was selfish. Nadine, she was pretty good. I mean, she wasn't selfish. So she asked me if I wanted to read the book of Matthew with her, and in fact I did. I wanted to see if this whole Jesus thing was real. I still had serious issues with Jesus, though, but it was only because I associated him with Christianity. There's no way I would ever call myself a Christian, but I figured I should see it for myself. So I told her yes. And so I started reading the Bible together, and she said, we would eat chocolates, smoke cigarettes, and read the Bible, which is the only way to do it, if you ask me. The Bible is so good with chocolate. I always thought the Bible was more of a salad thing, you know, but it isn't. It's a chocolate thing. I don't know women and chocolate, you know. It's a chocolate thing. We started reading through Matthew, and though I thought it was all very interesting, you know, I found Jesus very disturbing, very straightforward. He wasn't diplomatic. And yet I felt like if I met him, he would really like me. I can't tell you how freeing it was to realize if I met Jesus, he would like me. I never felt like that about some of the Christians on the radio, that if they met me, they would not like me. So I suspect that most of us here probably identify more with Nadine than we do with Penny, though there may be somebody who identifies with Penny. But perhaps deep down, if you're more like Nadine, you're like me, and wonder, will the risen Christ really show up and excite people who are living life without any sense of guilt and doing whatever they want with their lives? Will Jesus show up and appear to them if somehow I try to be faithful with him? And what I would say to you is there's only one way to find out. The only way for us to find out if Blue Light Jazz is true, if Reed College had happened, and if the road to Emmaus is true, is for us to let God send us into the lives of others who are walking away from religion because of their disappointment and disillusionment. Try to be more like Nadine, authentic, confident, not necessarily smoking cigarettes while you read the Bible, but authentic and confident with who you are, ready to be the church in the wild, and yet really gracious to people like Penny. I think if we do that, we'll discern that our hearts will burn and that our eyes will open as God uses us to excite the hearts and to open the eyes of the people who really think they're done with the God thing. Let's pray. Lord God, we thank you for this message of resurrection, and we ask that you help us to be able to believe it enough, not only that we trust you with our lives, we trust that we're going to go to heaven when we die, but to actually seek to be able to help others grow, and perhaps grow enough ourselves that when we get to know somebody like Penny, that like Nadine did, we can find ways to talk and even perhaps share the scriptures. We're going to trust you with the rest, the heartwarming and the eye-opening, as we try to be faithful. We pray in Jesus' name.